Hi everyone, it's B.Chavez from EvilGenius Sports Performance. I'd like to welcome you back to the EvilGenius Sports Performance video blog. I believe this is volume 4. Been gone for a little bit. For that I apologize. In the last few we've been talking about common language, about developing a language that we can all speak so that we can all communicate seamlessly and systematically. Something that's very vital to the EvilGenius way of doing things. It's very vital that people in different countries and different languages and different everything can agree on terms. You know, what intensity is. I think that's what we covered in the last episode. Intensity is percent of maximum. So no matter where you are or who you're talking to, if you say intensity, you're talking about the same thing. And that's going to make our discussions about a seamless, coherent sports performance program much easier. It's the power of science. It's the why science is called the international language. It's because everyone agrees on what things are. When you say temperature or force or whatever you use in a scientific context, it means the same thing everywhere. Universal terms. That's what we're shooting for here. I think it's the one thing that has been missing in athletics and sports performance is every brand has their own secret language, and as soon as you leave that brand, you go from a West Side model to some other model, you have to learn a whole new language, and that's not the way it should be, in my opinion. So again, with common language, we've covered some of the key aspects. Today we're going to talk briefly, and actually it's going to be briefly, even though it's probably the most important term in all of sports performance, and that is volume. Again, we said intensity is percent of maximum via pretty much the Eastern Europeans, the Russians, and so had defined that most coherently. And also, they had, coincidentally, the best concept on volume. This is something I hear misused all the time, and even I do it occasionally. I'll say at the end of my heavy sets of, my pyramid up to my heavy set, at the end I'll say, oh, I'll do a little volume. That's not right. That's not correct. It's correct in that a set of reps is volume, but it's not really a good use of the term. And I don't like to do that, but I find myself doing it. I've caught myself on video doing that a couple times, and it's not cool. Volume, via the Eastern European model, is the total amount of weight one lifts in a session. Okay, whether you do it in singles or whether you do it in sets of 10 or whether you do one giant set, it's if the barbell's loaded to 100 pounds, okay, and you lift it one time, you did 100 pounds of volume. If you lift it 10 times, you did 1,000 pounds of volume. It's the total amount of weight on the bar. That's how much times lifted. It's very, very simple. It is a super simple concept, which is why this talk's going to be brief. However, it is the most important, or possibly the most important, in that all the major studies correlate total training volume with training success. Okay, and I say training success because I didn't say success in strength training or maximum lifts or anything, because it consistently follows in all sports. He who hits the most baseballs in practice, for the most part, hits the most baseballs in games. He who swings the most serves in tennis practice tends to serve best in tennis games, tennis matches. Volume, training volume, incorporates practice at one's skill. If you're practicing properly, live practice. So he who does the most tends to perform the most efficiently on the field. So, training volume, in me being a power lifter, is really just squat, bench, and deadlift. If you're an Olympic lifter, it's, clean and jerk and snatch. The point is, roughly speaking, the more you do, the better you are. Okay, this has even been followed through in bodybuilding. Generally speaking, bodybuilders who do the most volume tend to have the largest, most effective muscle for their sport. Volume seems to be the key issue. Okay. Now, it's not as simple as that, particularly in powerlifting, strength training. It's also average intensity. Intensity, as we defined, was a maximum ability. Okay. If you can only bench press 400 pounds, then that's 100% intensity, and everything below that is a percentage thereof. 300%, 300 pounds is 75%, so on and so on. Pretty simple concept. So now we've got this concept of volume, which is the amount of weight one lifted total, okay, and then we've got the blended concept of average intensity, which really for strength athletes seems to be the issue. If you're a baseball player or something like that, you can't talk training volume and intensity because you either swing the bat or you don't. The concept of weighted bats and all that, I'm not going to go into that because it's really bad business, bad motor function, bad motor learning. But so if you have a maximum bench press of 400 pounds and you choose to train, let's say, a relatively high velocity, low intensity, say 50%, pretty simple math, you've got a 200-pound barbell. So now every repetition you do is 200 pounds. And it's like putting pounds in a bank. You do one, that's 200 pounds. And you do another one, that's 400 pounds. And so on to a volume, to a target training volume. And the subject can be very complicated. The Eastern Europeans concluded that more advanced athletes tend to be able to tolerate more volume, so much so that they could actually categorize athletes as far as intermediate, advanced, etc., by the amount of training volume they could do, and they even projected training volume. They said you, as a intermediate athlete, need to strive for 25% more total training volume. And because the term was well understood, because the language was well understood, athletes knew exactly what that meant. They knew what they needed to strive for. They knew what they were trying to do. Not let the bar load fall below, in the European model, probably 70%, and achieve a total volume of 22,000 pounds or whatever it was. So you've got this concept of volume. It's not just randomly throwing repetitions at the end of a workout. It is a concept of the total amount of weight lifted after warm-ups in your workout. How much weight did you lift? Roughly speaking, the more weight you lifted, as long as it's above a given threshold intensity, and that's an argument for a separate video. There's a lot of people that think that different target intensities relate to different sports. For instance, bodybuilding probably shouldn't exceed a 65% intensity, and powerlifting shouldn't decline below a given intensity, and for sprinting and true speed sports, maybe as intensities as high as 90%. I tend to agree with that somewhat. I don't necessarily agree with the exact numbers that are out there, but I do tend to believe that practice relates very strongly to performance, and you have to practice very similar to your task you're going to perform on the field of play. So in that, it's true. I also do believe in periodization, where you do periods that don't necessarily relate to your sport. As a powerlifter, I think that doing some quasi-bodybuilding type training in the off-season to elevate one's total body mass, tend to smooth out weaknesses, improve weak body parts, I think makes you a better athlete in the long term when you go to periodize toward an event. But again, that's a separate video. But right now, we're just trying to define the term. Intensity, we talked about, that's percent of maximum, and then volume is very specifically the total amount of weight lifted in a workout. Just knowing that and just recording that based on what you're doing already can give you wild insights into why what you're doing is working and why what you're doing maybe isn't working. So consider it training volume in the Eastern European model, and of course in the EvilGS Sports Performance model, is total weight lifted per workout. Think about it, consider it, look at it. You should definitely be keeping a training journal. So just go through there and look at what you're doing, and it will probably make some lights go off, some bells and whistles, and you'll begin to see different things working. Even within different exercises, you might see you have a tendency toward doing or not doing volumes within exercises. Your total volume definitely relates to your total fitness. All of these things, very, very powerful tool. Consider it. We'll come back to this subject and we'll begin to really integrate, training volume, training intensity, and in the future we'll talk about training frequency, and then we'll have the tools to create an integrated total sports performance program, which is what EvilGS Sports Performance is about. It's an integrated whole. It's nutrition, it's training, it's athletic endeavor, if that's what you do. Again, being a powerlifter, pretty much lifting weights is my athletic endeavor. But I realize that most of you out there are probably football, basketball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse players. All of you have to think about these things. And then also, covering all of that, training volume takes an inroad into your total athletic ability. So if you're training for a sport, you may have to modulate your volume against your training season, which is where the concept and the talk about periodization is going to come in. So again, training volume, total amount of weight lifted, or if you're an athlete, total amount of bat swings, total amount of goals kicked. It's total training volume. It's the total amount one does in a session. And when I say in a session, I mean in a workout, in a week's workouts, in a month's workouts, in a total training cycle. So think about these things, consider them. We'll talk more about more training concepts, and we'll begin to put them all together into a whole in the next video. Until then, please like the video, dislike the video, leave your feedback, talk. Evil Genius Sports Performance is all about communication. I want to hear from you. Other people want to hear from you. Okay, more dialogue, more communication means more ideas, more thoughts. And the more thoughts, the more we can conquer these things. I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of the questions. If we can get together, communicate, synchronize, we can make better athletes. You can be better. I can be better. I want to see the 1,200-pound squats. I want to see the 1,000-pound raw squats. These are things we can do. We just talk about it, train hard, we can get on with it. It's going to be great. Until next time, B.Chavez, Evil Genius Sports Performance. Stay strong.